everyone, welcome back to On The Fly. Today we're going to take a look at quarterfinal review of the Women's World Championship. So jumping right on into it today with the scores from today's games. We have first off USA beating Hungary 12-1. This game pretty straightforward, as you can probably tell by the score. Yes, it wasn't yet another blowout for the US, and I would expect more of the same as you look to this next semifinal matchup for them. However, that still remains to be seen, as the Czechs typically are better than the Swiss would be, and they're definitely better than Hungary was. So it's going to be interesting to see sort of how the Czechs play, and that sort of brings us to the next part. Yes, the Czechs did beat Finland today 2-1 in overtime. So in this game, I was very surprised to see how evenly matched this really was. The Czechs, the Group B team, getting their first ever time in the semifinals, beating Finland today, knocking them off for the first time in a long time that they haven't made it. And really, when you look at that game, it is a big step in terms of Group B being able to beat Group A. We almost had two of those today, but with the Czechs beating the Finns, that is huge. And when I say huge, that's big. That's really big for women's hockey. Seeing some of these lower teams starting to beat some of the more powerhouses, and it's not going to be too much longer until the US and Canada gets dethroned. And I wouldn't be too surprised if that happens fairly soon, especially Canada starting to look like they're falling off a little bit. The US looks more powerful than ever, so it's going to be interesting to see what goes on there. But, so in this game, Czechs did win 2-1 in overtime, very evenly matched throughout the entire game. At some points, you thought Finland was going to run with it. At some points, you thought the Czechs were going to run with it. But at the end of the day, 2-1 Czechs is your final in overtime. And the Czechs advance to the semifinals for the first time in their history. Moving on to the third game of the day, and this is Canada beating Sweden 3-0. This game, don't let the score fool you. This was a blowout in and of itself. Although there was only 3 goals scored for Canada, that is sort of a red flag in and of itself, but they did really dominate from start to finish. Canada did not give Sweden anything, and really sort of just took the game over. One concern I have there, of course, is Sweden did play that collapsing style of game that the Swiss really have mastered, and the Swiss are going to be better than Sweden is. So definitely something to be wary of as you watch tomorrow's semifinal action, or not tomorrow, 2 days from now, semifinal action. But when you really look at this is going to be an issue for Canada, and they're going to have trouble. They're trying too hard right now to try and really pass it, make these pretty goals. But at the end of the day, you got to score them how you score them, and really sort of just take that point shot, let people in front battle through it, and try and just win the right way. And I think that's how Canada's going to do well. That's how they always have won. But this year seems to be they seem to be struggling with that sort of mentality. So I'm just going to see what goes on there, whether they can figure that out by the time they play the US in the finals. Moving on to the fourth game of the day, we have the Swiss beating Japan in a shootout. As I just mentioned, Swiss did win 2-1. And in this game, I was very shocked to see Swiss make it that far. Japan really had a foothold in that game, and I thought in that overtime period, they were going to win. I thought Japan finally had it. That was my other Group B team that I was sort of hoping on. Yes, Japan is technically a Group A team with the dismissal of Russia, but really in all our hearts, they are a Group B team. And really, I thought Japan had it this year, and I thought they had that shot with nothing to lose, coming in with no expectations, being a Group B team in Group A. I thought they were going to pull off the upset and beat the Swiss, and they almost did in that overtime period. They had them up until it was very evenly matched, but as soon as that overtime period started, Japan looked like the better team, and unfortunately they just couldn't find it and figure it out in the shootout. But with that, it does leave the quarterfinal matchups, US versus the Czechs, Canada versus the Swiss. And as we look to 2 days from now schedule, Finland plays Hungary at 6 a.m. That is the 5th, and you sort of play for that 5th pick. I'm probably not going to cover that when we do our next video unless I can find some TV footage of it. It's going to be very hard. I don't think they'll be streaming it just because it isn't necessarily the top end of the bracket, and the games don't matter in the grand scheme of things. But if I do, I will make sure to include that in the next video. 8 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have U.S. playing the Czechs. This game, I do expect the U.S. to win, but I don't think it's going to be as big of a margin as they did with Hungary today. Czechs are a far better team, and they did their own beating on Hungary, winning 7-0 earlier in the tournament. So it's interesting to see what goes on there, whether or not the U.S. can figure it out. But moving on to the third game of the day with Japan playing Sweden at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And in this game, I think it's going to be really evenly matched. That's probably going to be the best game of the day, and it's probably not even going to be televised. But Japan and Sweden both sort of that Group B rather sort of team. Interesting to see what goes on there. And finally, the 12 o'clock p.m. game, Canada versus the Swiss, coming up at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This game, I do expect Canada to blow out yet again. But with that, if you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching. If you'd like to drop a like, if you really like to, consider subscribing. Tell all your friends to comment down below your thoughts on the quarterfinal action of the Women's World Championship. Until next time, see ya.